in this, from the root causes? Should they have been drilling in such a deep, uncharted area, to what you think policy on the federal and state level should be about offshore drilling?
Well, I mean, looking at it sort of before the accident, evidently it has been, at least according to news accounts, revealed that certain permitting was allowed or available in this scenario that maybe shouldn't have been, and better oversight by the agency involved would have been more responsible. Obviously, it's deep. It's a mile down, for crying out loud, and so that's of concern. What's of greater concern to me also is evidently in some of the deep wells in the North Sea as well as off the coast of Brazil, there are additional safety procedures that have been utilized, specifically remote devices to close off the fail-safe device that failed. And I still don't understand why that wasn't employed in this particular well. It should have been. And I'm very glad that last session Florida didn't take the step to go ahead and allow and permit offshore drilling. And my position has always been that it's something I'm willing to consider so long as it's far enough, clean enough, and safe enough. This experience in the Gulf recently clearly indicates to me that it's not far enough, obviously, even though it's 100 miles away from us. It's not clean enough. I mean, it's one of the most disgusting things you can see. And it certainly isn't safe enough because 11 people were killed as a result of it, and we don't know how much wildlife that might be impacted significantly as well. So, looking at it, as a Monday morning quarterback, I think there's a lot of things that could have been done to perhaps prevent what has now occurred. Since the accident, I can tell you that I believe, and I'm very proud of how Florida has responded. Very shortly after the incident occurred, I signed an executive order declaring a state of emergency for the 6 counties in the Panhandle initially, and then extending down to Sarasota County on the Gulf Coast. What I'm considering and may do by the end of the day is extend that declaration to include down to Monroe and maybe up to Dade. I don't know about Broward yet, but I will consult with Secretary Mike Soule at DEP as well as Dave Halstead with our Emergency Management Division before determining exactly how much further to extend it. But that gives us some pretty good opportunities to further protect Florida. Among them, it activates the Florida National Guard, gives us the ability to have about 2,500 troops at the ready, both for protection of Florida and cleanup should we be impacted, which is probably more likely than not. It also activates emergency operations centers in all those affected counties. And the good news on that front is that we have some of the best EOCs on the planet, particularly because of the experience we have from hurricanes. And so they've been practiced and practiced and practiced, and we just have great people. In addition to that, we've received $25 million initially from BP several weeks ago to help with the protection of Florida and the cleanup. And then they've committed more recently another $25 million, so it's a total of $50 million. The second 25 to promote Florida and indicate to people around the country that our beaches are still clean, that we have not been impacted by tar balls directly from Deepwater Horizon, that in fact the ones in the Keys came from a different source, which is good news. But we also know now that oil is getting into the loop current, and that's of significant concern to the Florida Straits, South Florida, and the Keys. And that's why I probably will do the extension of the emergency order before the end of the business day today.
Well, you mentioned 100. You mentioned 100 miles. Obviously, wasn't good enough in this case. Do you have a limit? I mean, where would you like? What's the closest you would like to see drilling to Florida's coast or any coast?
I'm not a scientist, Anthony, and I think that you have to depend on scientists for that kind of advice. But this one is about 200 to 300 miles away from the west coast of Florida, and it could have a very adverse impact on the west coast of Florida. So currently, given what we know now, that isn't far enough. Given the current technology, I mean, not now, no way.
Can you tell how much they hit?
I'm sorry, just to follow up, but you've gotten some of the money from BP. What about, worst case scenario, we still don't know how bad it's going to be, potentially ruining jobs, economy, tourism, not to mention the seafood fisheries. Is there anything that the state or governor could do to extract money from this federal government to, I guess, make good on some of these things that we're going to see losses from?
Yeah, well, certainly from the federal government, I don't think there's any question about it. The administration has been very engaged. Secretary Napolitano has come down. We were in the Panhandle together not long ago. We get briefings almost daily from Valerie Jarrett with the White House for the Gulf state governors, and I'm grateful for that. But in addition, from a non-public sector point of view, the Attorney General and I have established the workings of a legal team to fight for Florida in the future and appropriate compensation should it be necessary. And I think we did it in a good way by putting former Attorney General Bob Butterworth and Jim Smith to have the chance to set up sort of a vetting process as to who those attorneys might be and how they would operate on behalf of Florida. So yeah, I think we will clearly have that opportunity to have additional compensation both publicly and privately.
Have you been briefed on like what the worst case scenario is? How bad could this thing get? I mean, I read something today in the Times that it might be $2 million gallons a day that's pumping in there.
I saw that too, and there's got to be different kinds of reports that are going to come out from time to time. I think it's important that we try to stay as factual as we possibly can, and I don't want to latch on to a report in a blog said this and run with it. Nor do I want to be dismissive of what might be the facts. I remember when I first went out there, the first flyover I did, and I was with Secretary Sol, and at that time they were telling us that they thought about 42,000 gallons a day were going into the Gulf. Now, obviously, that's been significantly modified to about 210,000 gallons a day. I think a obvious reality is they're not sure. It's a mile down. And, we now see pictures that are pretty horrific of this thing spewing out of the bottom. It looks like a volcano of oil. And so I think the real answer is they don't know for sure. And, sometimes I guess we have to accept that. But I think what we cannot accept is Florida not being prepared, not being ready, and not being properly compensated after the fact. And I think on all those fronts, we are ready.
How much of a tourism hit has the state taken, or are you expecting it to take?
I didn't hear the first
How much
one.
of a tourism hit has the state
Oh.
taken yet, and what are you expecting? What could be the worst case?
I can describe it to you from personal experience. On weekend before last, I was in Apalachicola on that Saturday. I was in Destin on that Sunday. It was Mother's Day Sunday, so I can remember it. And it was busy. Mm-hmm. That's been about 10, 12 days ago now. Right. But what I heard from charter boat fishermen that same weekend is that their phones had stopped ringing, that the fear factor alone, if you will, was impacting people because of the significant media attention and pictures, frankly, from Louisiana. And, people draw conclusions from that kind of graphic and visual that maybe that applied to Florida. I can tell you firsthand, the beaches were beautiful the weekend I was there. There's still no direct impact to Florida. The fish are biting. People should continue to come to our hotels and our restaurants. But anecdotally from those charter fishermen, I know that they're suffering losses. And so that may be part of the compensation that we pursue.
We had a story today, the Keys are really worried too right now, obviously.
Of course.
And that they're suffering some losses down there.
Well, you had about 48 hours on national TV around the clock that tar balls had come up on Key West. Mm-hmm. Now, only until those 48 hours passed and testing was actually done and scientists were able to weigh in, were we able to discover that it wasn't from that incident. And I can share with you, because I get briefed on it a lot these days. Last year alone in Florida, we had 670 tar balls wash up on the shore in our state, at some point in the state.
It's not uncommon.
It's not uncommon.
I mean, the big tankers out here purge their bilges and tar balls will come up. They really crack down on that, but it still occurs from time to time.
Right.
Governor,